I want to give a shout out this morning on All Saints Day, November 1st, 2024, to one Jessica Schulberg of HuffPost News. So, Ms. Schulberg writes this article that somebody forwarded on to me, um, and the article is entitled "Every Halloween, Cops Brag About Arresting Sex Offenders." Period. Here's what the arrests were actually for, and it's a very interesting article. The subtitle, I guess, under it is called "HuffPost Obtained 37 Arrest Reports, the overwhelming majority of which shows that law enforcement officers were arresting people for minor technical parole violations." I believe she's got that wrong. It's not parole, it's probation violations, often mistaken. They're not the same. But in any event, I've written to Ms. Schulberg this morning to thank her for her coverage of October 31st, yesterday at 5:45 a.m., almost exactly 24 hours ago. So I want to read the article a little bit, but basically it calls out some very interesting points, and when you read the comments, you can see why people are in real need of critical thinking skills in schools. So it says every year on Halloween, law enforcement agencies throughout the country conduct random checks on people who are required to register as SOs. The sweep's called Operation Boo. In her jurisdiction, I think they looked at Southern California, San Diego, which, not perhaps coincidentally, Ghost CC unit helps to gin up those stats. They typically result in a handful of arrests, which cops tout as evidence of the utility in protecting children from would-be predators. Okay. And the press dutifully spread this message. So she explains how the press willingly acts as shills for the cops. And the cops put out this press release. For the 26th year, Operation Boo keeps sex offenders in check, the San Diego Union Tribune wrote in 2019, quoting on, with an image of a police officer holding a seized bong. Operation Boo nabs 3 sex offenders on Halloween, the Reading Record Searchlight wrote in 2022. On Halloween, some states take extra safety measures to keep sex offenders away from kids, CNN says that year. The press releases announcing these arrests rarely specify the cause of the arrest, leaving the reader to assume the charges were related to sexual misconduct or child endangerment. Very good. Last year, the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation announced that after conducting nearly 2,000 compliance checks, 53 people were found out of compliance, quote unquote, with the terms of it. Here it says parole, maybe it is, but generally we're talking about probation, as well as parole in some cases, I suppose, 43 of whom were arrested. When I asked CDCR what parole violation each of the 53 people had committed, listen to this. Information Officer Mary Jimenez told me to submit a public information request. So when they do as they did in my case or every other case before trial, they will trot out a press release breathlessly talking about how they nab somebody and that you are in violation of all these terrible things. And thank God they got you off. And please call this number if you know of any victims. Of course, you know, most of these are proactive stings that I'm referring to, but they still rush out this press release right away, you know. Never mind that it taints the jury pool. Never mind that it goes out there and destroys your reputation well in advance of all the other stories they're going to put out that basically are the nail in your coffin and make you look guilty before you get your day in court, which of course is something that they do frequently. Here, when you want the facts, oh no, you have to do a FOIA request. We can't give that information out, even though it's public information as well. Because such requests, quoting on, are limited to specific existing documents, I asked for the arrest reports of the 43 who were arrested, and she says that she got 37 of those, and it took 7 months, she says, going on, right? And this interesting nugget. So people in California who are required to register as SOs already live under a web of restrictions, and I've talked about this too, who they socialize with, where they can live, work, travel, They're required to surrender their privacy by wearing GPS trackers. And as I've demonstrated with one of my arrests, I was actually in a public library as well as a hotel working on my book in the very open business center on camera, 25 feet from the main door exit. And they arrested me claiming that I must have been there for a child. Did they have any evidence? No, no evidence, but they didn't need evidence because you're on probation. So you are a sitting duck and a slave to whatever the probation officer tells you. If you don't believe me, check out the requirements in places like New York and Tennessee. Additional restrictions, of course, on Halloween, but otherwise, what counts as legal activity like drinking alcohol or pornography can be grounds for arrest. If you're unhoused, the new fancy word for homeless, if you're unhoused as a registered SO, many of whom you become homeless because of restrictions on where they can live, she writes, they're required to re-register as transient every 30 days. And she goes on to say that one person went 34 days, and when they finally got around to it, they were arrested because they lost track of time. It didn't matter, still re-arrested. Because remember, every time they do an arrest and they book you, it sets the clock again, makes you look bad, it gins up the statistics. People read, oh, this person was arrested 5 times. And you don't know why they were arrested. You don't know if it was fair or a compliance issue. You assume by reading this article it had to be sex abuse of children. Okay? And she busts open, I'm sorry, not this article, but other articles, she busts open that myth. And she says over the course of 7 months, she was provided with 37 arrest reports stating that people were released with no arrest records. Okay? None of the reports described physical or sexual abuse of children or adults. Only 3 cases even vaguely suggested wrongdoing. And of those 3 cases, she says, was one alarming case of a man who was found with images of nude children in girls' underwear. I'm reading directly from her report, which he admitted to using quote unquote for sexual gratification. That is disturbing. In a second case, a man had a video of a naked infant in a bathtub on his phone, although it's unclear if his reasons for having the video were sexual. Maybe that was his own child. Maybe that was a niece or nephew that somebody had sent to him. You don't know, but you assume, of course, it's got to be bad. In the third case, a man was found with children's toys in his home, which he said belonged to his deceased uncle. Now, I had POs coming in, and they saw toys of my daughter before I had cleaned out her room and rented it, so I didn't lose my home, and they had to ask about that, particularly unicorns, which I found out after the fact apparently is a thing, okay? I didn't know that, okay? A lot of children like pink unicorns and other things, especially if they're girls, okay? So, again, I learn a lot by the perverts who study these things. And some of them are POs, by the way. So the overwhelming majority of arrest reports describe law enforcement officers arresting people for conduct that posed no threat to the community. Not being home by 5 p.m. Somebody showed up at 5:15. The police showed up at 5. Well, he was arrested when he showed up 15 minutes late. They missed a registration deadline. That's big here in Virginia. If you miss a registration deadline, of course, they love to arrest you. Communicating with other registered sex offenders. Well, what do you think happens when you block people from other areas of life, other communities, etc.? And they are seeking, as I have done and other people have done out there, they're seeking answers. You run into people all over the country who are doing the exact same thing as you. Okay, you run into mothers and fathers and uncles and aunts and people who are do-gooders who just want to try to help because they're tired of seeing these things, or they're told in their federal jobs that police cannot do what they're getting away with doing at the local level, and they're so outraged. They're active in their communities and their church, and etc. So what do you expect people to do? All right. I understand it's very popular to say they want everybody to go away, but it just doesn't work like that. And you don't understand that there are people like me out there who didn't actually do anything. And if you did do something, how long should they be punished? after all, right? We're supposed to have a principle in this world which says that, or in our jurisprudence, that says you do the time, you do the crime, you do the time, and then it's over. People forget that part. It's over. Okay? Oh no. If it has the word sex associated with it, sex plus children plus internet, it's got to be bad. And you don't need to know anything else about it. Sex plus internet, child sex, internet, bad. Okay? However you want to do it. Here's one interesting one I mentioned before in another video. Somebody had a usable amount of methamphetamine, so they were under the influence. The individual hit his head against a law enforcement vehicle, causing damage. Because of this, he was accused of resisting arrest and vandalism / malicious mischief, in addition to possession of the methamphetamine. Okay, so police love to rack, pack, and stack up charges because they know somebody might get off, and we don't want that to happen. So of course we're going to make it as difficult as possible on there. The question is, remember, why are police there? For public safety. Does this really help public safety if they lock you up for something like this? If they keep you locked up? If they create a huge record for you that you in turn can't function in society and that you end up relapsing into some of the same behaviors? Is this the proper way to actually solve the problem? Now, for those of you out here who say yes, I want you to tell me where your research is on all that. I mean, I've sparred with a number of people out there for a long, long time, and there's just got to be a better way. And their attitude that this somehow helps doesn't. Now, one thing she could improve at the end, she says, there's no reliable evidence that sex offender registries keep people safer. That's true. There is some research that they do, but there's a raft of research that says that they don't. And when I was sparring with John in VA, he was telling me repeatedly that they do. They don't. There's much more evidence that they don't work and that they're counterproductive. She does include a couple of links on here which are not particularly helpful. There are far better links out there. And I've reached out to her. Hopefully she'll reach out to me and I'll provide her with a lot more, including the 2024 meta-analysis of some 400 and some studies over 40 years and over 300,000 people who are so labeled, only to find out that there's not a whole bunch of evidence that supports what they're saying, that the registries actually keep people safer. And in the fact that there keeps having to be people who are apparently arrested for these crimes, according to the police, very dangerous people, apparently the registry is not doing anything. And the recidivism rate, although that's tricky business, is still, no matter how you slice it, fairly low. So the registry is being fueled by new people. And you have to ask how many of these people are actually people who would harm a child. So for the 1st of November, 2024, we're on the slide toward Thanksgiving. This is Norman Michael Ation with ICAC Unpacked. Have a good day.